Hey, Cody, thanks for jumping in with me today to talk a little bit about state and serializers. A lot of confusing stuff that I don't know that we are doing a great job of laying out clearly, especially as it relates to like how you want to approach the project.
Yeah, appreciate the help.
So you got a users table, you've got a reviews table, you've got a trails table, and the reviews is the join table. We're using dbdiagram.io. I've got a separate video about how to use that, which is, it's a nice tool just to be able to visually see it and kind of play around with the connections and the attributes of things. So one of the things that students struggle with is, well, how should I manage state? And there's some principles I think to keep in mind here. Number one, we don't need three separate states. We don't need users, reviews, and trails. We don't need to hold all of them. What is most common, I would say, from doing a lot of these projects and assessments is that you would hold the trails in state and then you would have a current user. And that typically is enough to satisfy the functionality of what the app wants. Sometimes people have other intentions. For instance, if you wanted a person to see all of the users and their profiles, then you would need a user's state. But a lot of times, if the point is for the user to be interacting with the trails and seeing reviews, then you don't need a user state. You just need a current user and you want the trails state. So one of the things I would say for sure, we're not holding reviews in state. That is not a good idea. It's not a good approach. It does simplify some of the state management things, which is why sometimes students gravitate in that direction. But it's one of the things we want you to fight with is the complex state management. That means if I make a new review, I am not updating reviews state. I'm updating the trails state because the trail will show all of their reviews. I mean, presumably you have a trail page and then you go there and you see, okay, here's all the reviews of the trail. That's probably one of the main purposes of the app. So when you make a new review, what you're updating is not the reviews state, it's the trail state. So you got to go to the trail state, iterate through it, find the trail object that has the review that you're interested in and add it to the reviews key. So that's a little bit of work. And I want to just pause there and see if what I said makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me.
Okay.
I think one of the only things I'm a little confused on is if say we are displaying all of the reviews on a trails page, like a trails detail page. We've got all the reviews listed, and we're going to want to say have the username in there as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm trying to understand. It's like, well, then how do I access that that username?
Right. And there's various solutions to that. In one of the things that's a transition from phase 3 to phase 4 is in phase 3 there was has one to many relationship, and you use this term include in the render JSON line, and that was your way of kind of including other information that was important. So in phase 4, you really should be using serializers. Serializers allow you to have uniformity and not have to worry about, well, in this action, I'm going to include this, but in this one, I'm going to include something else or I'm not including it. So by having a serializer, it's just like when you say render JSON, let's go to your Trails controller. You go to the index, which is the first one, and it's a little complicated because you have a nested route, but let's just assume we're looking at the all trails one. So when you say render JSON trails, what happens implicitly is if you've installed the active model serializers, then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go look for a trail serializer, and that will tell me what the JSON object looks like. So let's just go to a tab next to dbdiagram.io and look at it so people can see it. So you go to localhost 3000/trails. We've taken off all the authorization, so there's no security features here. So that is the current status based on the trail serializer, and we can literally go through the trail serializer and look at each thing. And if we take something out and refresh the page, we'll see a difference. So right now, you've got trail users as a key, and that is being generated through a custom method that you made in your serializer.
That's correct. Yeah.
And, that's sort of unnecessary to have a custom method, but I like that it's there because people can see like, oh, that's a possibility. So, that doesn't occur to everybody. And some people don't remember seeing that in the curriculum. But basically, since trail users is just users, there's two other ways that we can accomplish that. I want to show you that. So let's comment out 6 through 9.
Okay.
Which means we would want to take out the attribute trail users, because then it'll get confused there. And first of all, let's just refresh the page to show that now trail users is gone, right? Now, one of the things about trail users, which is going to be the exact same as if we put the attribute users up on the attributes line. So let's go to the end of attributes on 2 and put users. So it's important to know that even though it says attributes, they're not just attributes. They can be columns, attributes that the object has, or they can be methods, or they could be custom methods in the serializer. So they could be methods in the model, methods in the serializer. Users is a model method, because if you look at the user, if you look at the trail model, there is a has many users, right? So you defined a method called users, so it works. So if we refresh our trails now, it's back, right? And it's exactly the same. And for instance, you're sending a lot of extra information you don't really care about. You don't want the password digest to be being passed around the internet. I mean, not that it really matters, because it should be, unbreakable, but it's not necessary. So let me show you the other option and how it changes what comes out. When we go to the trail serializer, if we take out users at the end, and we say has many users on line 5, for example, you don't have to say the through part. You're just saying there's a trail has many users. Then we refresh it. Now we get something slightly different for our users. Now, how does it determine what you show? It goes to the user serializer. So go to the user serializer. And the key is that you'll notice that we don't get the reviews under the user object. That's because when you go to that second level, you only take the attributes. So when you say has many users, you go to the other serializer and you take the attributes. Because otherwise it would be an infinite loop. Then I'm like, okay, now I have has many reviews. Well, the reviews, and then go to the serializer. Now I got
Gotcha.
belong to the user. So that's the way that it's protected from that kind of infinite looping. And by the way, if you put on line 2, colon reviews, which you could instead of has many reviews, then you're back to having this. But this is really not recommended, because then now you're talking about like triple, like a double nested state, right? You've got the trails, and then you've got the users, and then under the users, you've got the reviews. So this gets back to your question. We go to the diagram, the DB diagram. When you show a review, you don't just want to say, here's what the person said. You may want to show their name, right? But do you have to do that by grabbing the user object in the review serializer? And the answer is no. You can just go to the review serializer, remembering that when we said trails, we were saying it has many reviews. And that means we're going through the attributes line of the review serializer. And instead of belongs to trail, belongs to user, which we're not accessing anyways, because we're at that second level. If we're going through the trails serializer and we got sent to the review serializer, we're not going to get these belongs to.
Yeah.
But I could just get the username by, say, making a custom method on line 2. So let's make a custom method called username. We'll just put it up there.
On line 2 is an attribute or just a custom method?
It's an attribute. But we're going to make a method. Now, we don't have to do it in the serializer. We can do it in the model. So let's go to the review model and let's write the code that you need, not the controller.
Oh, yeah. Let's go down to models.
Okay, so we're going to make a custom method. This is an instance method. Good. And what's the keyword for the object itself in an instance method?
We're going to use self.
Good. It's weird because in the class, of course, it's self, but in the serializer, it's object, which is
it's coming across that a little bit. So in
So,
this case,
yep,
go ahead.
go for it. No, you do it.
I was just going to say I've been meaning to switch this up to username, but for right now, the users just have a name.
But self here is a review. So we're missing one thing in between the self and the
right,
name.
we're in the reviews. So we want to look at self dot user.
Yeah.
Dot name.
Yeah, exactly. Because the review has to have a user associated with it. That's part of the belongs to an application record, and there's a validation attached to that. So it's definitely going to give me a user object, and then from the user object, I can get the name. So
Gotcha.
let's save that, and let's go back to our trails, and let's refresh and see if now under the reviews, the username comes up.
And there we go.
Yeah. And so that's really the easiest way to get that piece of information attached, is to just have it be a custom method inside of the serializer.
Awesome.
So again, one other thing I just want to point out, we weren't actually interested in having the users for the trails, or were we? I was kind of, oh, no, you were, because you had trail users, right?
Yeah, so we might have we might be displaying a list of all the reviews on, say, like a trail detail page, in which case we might want to have the user's name along with the content of their review.
Right. But this is a confusing point about one of the requirements of the project. So you want to show the has many through relationship. When you have your trail index page, no, sorry, your trail show page, and you're showing all the reviews for the trail, you've got all the information you need under reviews, because now we put the username in there. So it'll be very easy. We can see the stars, we can see the comment, we can see the username. It's all there. We just got to turn it into a card. It's going to look nice. But this doesn't meet the has many through requirement, because you're not using the fact that Trails has a method called users. So you have two options in your project, trail.users or user.trails.
Right.
And you just have to kind of decide which one you want to do. But there are implications for state. So for instance, if I decide maybe it's a little bit redundant, like if we did the trail show page and we had these review cards and it showed the fact that Cody Barker and Kelly Radwanski said these things, then it would seem redundant to somewhere else say, and here's all the users who have made reviews, right?
Yeah.
So, but you could, and that would meet the requirement as long as you're using users. But the point is that when you make a new review, you're going to have to manage that state too. So it's not just adding something to the Trails reviews, you got to add something to the Trails user as well. And so that's, figuring out how to do that as part of the complex state management. And by the way, in the Trail serializer, one of the reasons why it might be a good idea to do the custom method instead of just leaning on has many users is that has many users actually returns a non-unique list. And I don't know if you can review the same trail twice. Different apps have different kind of controls, but say you could review the same trail multiple times. You don't really want to see Cody Barker, Cody Barker, Cody Barker. Here's the users who have made reviews, and then your name is listed 3 times. So there's a way if you go to the trail serializer and you go back to saying, I'm going to make something called trail users, then you have the opportunity there to throw in a unique call on the array, and that will limit it down to unique users.
Gotcha.
But then you're back to the whole user object, and you got to think about, okay, well, am I going to return the whole user object? Am I going to create kind of a unique object inside of my method and that's what I'm returning? There's various solutions to that. But.
Gotcha.
All right. We covered a lot of ground. Any big questions?
No, that was great. That was super helpful. I think I was kind of dancing around this, getting kind of close, but finding the appropriate method for actually getting this to show up like I wanted. That was super helpful. So I appreciate it.
Right. Well, I'll get this posted, and then you'll be able to go back and look at it if you need to review it again. Thanks for being willing to share it with everybody.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right, Cody. Talk to you later.
Yeah, you too.